The classroom door slammed against the wall with such force that the fire extinguisher rattled in its case. Madison Harper froze mid-sentence at the whiteboard, her hand still holding the red marker as three figures stormed into her AP Literature class. Blake Harrison, 6'2" of entitled rage, pointed his phone directly at her face. "You thought you could fail me." His voice carried the kind of menace that made her other students shrink into their seats. "Watch your career end in 30 seconds. The screen glowed with something that made Madison's stomach drop. Even from 10 feet away. She could see it was her face, her body, but doing things she'd never done. Things that would destroy everything she'd worked for. "That's not real," Madison said, but her voice came out smaller than she intended. Behind Blake, Skylar Mitchell had her phone up, live streaming everything. The red recording light blinked like a predator's eye. "Doesn't matter if it's real." Blake took another step forward. "What matters is that, by tomorrow morning, every parent, every school board member, every student will have seen their new English teacher in some very compromising positions." Madison's back hit the whiteboard. The marker fell from her hand, hitting the floor with a sound like a gunshot in the silent room. 28 students watched, some with phones raised, others too shocked to move. The smart board behind her still displayed the quote she'd been analyzing, "The truth will set you free." The irony wasn't lost on her. "Unless," Blake continued, his designer sneakers squeaking against the linoleum as he closed the distance, "you change my grade, right now, in front of everyone." Madison's hands trembled, but not from fear, from rage. 3 weeks. She'd been teaching at Westbridge Academy for 3 weeks, and already she'd discovered what everyone else pretended not to see. Blake Harrison wasn't just another privileged kid. He was a predator who'd learned that money and technology could destroy anyone who challenged him. 24 hours earlier, none of this had seemed possible. Madison had walked into Westbridge Academy that morning with the kind of optimism only first-year teachers possess. The parking lot was full of luxury cars that cost more than her annual salary. But she didn't care. She had lesson plans, enthusiasm, and a genuine love for literature that she couldn't wait to share. "Morning. Beautiful." Mason's voice came through her car speakers as she gathered her things. Her boyfriend of 3 years worked as a trainer at a local MMA gym, and his early morning enthusiasm was infectious. "First day of week 4. You've got this." "I caught a student plagiarizing," Madison said, adjusting her rearview mirror. "Blake Harrison, you know, the mayor's nephew." There was a pause. "Be careful with that one, Mads. I've heard stories."
"I have to maintain standards," she said, grabbing her coffee and bag. "If I let one student cheat, they all will." "I know, just watch your back." "Okay, rich kids play by different rules." Madison had laughed it off then. "What's he going to do? Have his daddy buy me out of my job?" Now, standing in her classroom with Blake's phone inches from her face, that conversation felt like it had happened in another lifetime. Tick-tock. "Miss Harper." Blake's breath smelled like energy drinks and privilege. "Change the grade, or this video goes wide. You've got 10 seconds. Madison looked around the room. Some students had their phones down, uncomfortable with what was happening. Others were recording, already composing their social media posts, in the back row. Colton Williams looked like he might throw up. He was Blake's best friend. But even he seemed to realize this had gone too far. 5 seconds. Blake counted down. 4, 3. That morning had started so normally.
Madison had arrived early, as always, brewing coffee in the teacher's lounge and reviewing her lesson plans. She loved the quiet moments before students arrived, when the building felt full of possibility instead of politics. She'd been grading papers when she found it. Blake's essay on The Great Gatsby was eloquent, insightful, and written by someone else. A quick search revealed it was lifted wholesale from a university paper published 2 years ago. He hadn't even bothered to change the formatting. Protocol was clear. Academic dishonesty meant automatic failure and a report to administration. Madison had documented everything, prepared her evidence, and waited for Blake to arrive. He'd strolled in 20 minutes late, as usual, dropping into his seat like he owned it, which, given his family's donations to the school, he practically did. "Mr. Harrison," Madison had said, keeping her voice level, "please see me after class about your essay." The look he'd given her should have been a warning, not embarrassment or concern, but calculation, like a chess player who'd just seen 3 moves ahead. After class, she'd shown him the evidence, his essay side by side with the original, highlighting software showing a 97% match. Blake had leaned back in his chair, completely unfazed. "So," he'd said, "so you plagiarized." Madison had replied, "This is an automatic failure for the assignment." Blake had laughed. Actually laughed. "You must be new here. Academic integrity doesn't change based on how long I've been teaching." "No, but reality does." He'd stood up, towering over her desk. "Do you know who I am, who my family is? One word from my uncle, and you're teaching kindergarten in Nebraska." Madison had met his gaze steadily. "Your essay grade is F. You can speak to Principal Coleman if you have concerns." The transformation in Blake's face had been instant. The casual arrogance melted away, replaced by something darker. "You're going to regret this," he'd said quietly. "I promise you that." She'd reported the incident to Principal Coleman immediately. He'd seemed supportive, talking about standards and integrity. But she'd noticed how his hands fidgeted with his pen, how his eyes kept darting to the photo of the new gymnasium on his wall. The Harrison family name was etched in gold above the entrance. By lunch, the whispers had started. Madison walked into the faculty room to find conversation stopping mid-sentence. Other teachers gave her sympathetic looks but kept their distance, like she had something contagious. "You failed Blake Harrison, Jessica Chen, who taught calculus," had whispered during passing period. "Are you insane? He plagiarized," Madison had said simply. "So last year he submitted the same essay for 3 different classes. Everyone knows. Nobody does anything." "Well, I'm not everyone." Jessica had looked at her with a mixture of admiration and pity. "No, you're not. And that's going to be a problem." The first attack had come through social media. Fake accounts with Madison's name and photo started appearing on Instagram and Twitter, posting inflammatory comments about students and faculty. The posts were crude, racist, completely fabricated, but sophisticated enough that casual viewers might believe them. Madison had spent her lunch period trying to report the accounts, but new ones popped up faster than she could document them. Screenshots were already circulating among students. She heard giggles following her down the hallway, saw phones quickly hidden when she turned around. After school, she'd found her car vandalized. Nothing dramatic, just enough to send a message. Her windshield wipers bent, mirrors adjusted, a sticky residue on her door handle that took 15 minutes to clean off. No permanent damage, nothing she could prove. But the intent was clear. She'd sat in her car for a long moment, considering her options. She could back down, change Blake's grade, pretend none of this had happened. It would be easy, safe, smart, even. Instead, she'd driven to Mason's gym. "You should see the other guy," Mason had joked when she walked in, gesturing to the heavy bag he'd been working with. His smile faded when he saw her face. What happened? She'd told him everything. The plagiarism, the threats, the social media attacks, the vandalism. Mason had listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening with each detail. "Let me talk to him," he'd said when she finished. "No," Madison had been firm. "This is my battle. I need to handle it professionally." "Professionally, Mads? This kid is cyberbullying you. That's illegal." "I know. I'm documenting everything. If it escalates, I'll involve the police." Mason had pulled her into a hug. "You know I've got your back. Right. Whatever you need." "I know, but I need to do this right. By the book. Show them that integrity matters more than intimidation." That night, she'd graded papers like nothing had happened, prepared her lessons for the next day, and ignored the notifications blowing up her phone. The fake accounts were getting more creative, more vicious. Someone had even created a dating profile with her information. The next morning, this morning, she'd arrived to find her classroom already occupied. Blake sat at her desk, feet up, scrolling through his phone. Skylar Mitchell perched on a student desk, filming everything. Colton Williams stood by the door like a reluctant bouncer. "Morning, Miss Harper," Blake had said without looking up. "We need to have a conversation about my grade." "Get out of my chair," Madison had said evenly. "And if you want to discuss your grade, make an appointment during office hours." Blake had laughed. "See, that's your problem. You think the normal rules apply here. But let me explain how things really work at Westbridge." He'd stood slowly, making a show of his height advantage. "My family built the new gym, the science wing, the theater. This school exists because we allow it to exist. And teachers who don't understand their place, they don't last long." "Is that a threat?" Madison had asked. "It's a kindness," Blake had replied. "A chance to save yourself, change my grade, apologize for the misunderstanding. And all this goes away. The social media accounts, the rumors, everything. Like magic." "And if I don't," Blake had smiled then, and it was the smile of someone who'd never faced a real consequence in his life. "Then things get worse. Much worse. See, Skylar here is quite talented with video editing. Amazing what you can do with AI these days. Deep fakes are getting so realistic, aren't they?" Madison's blood had run cold. "You wouldn't." "Wouldn't I?" Blake had pulled out his phone. "Here's a preview, just a test run. Really. Skylar worked on it all night." The video was only 10 seconds long, but it was enough. Madison's face, convincingly mapped onto someone else's body, in a situation that would end any teaching career instantly. The technology wasn't perfect, if you looked closely. You could see the telltale signs of manipulation, but who looked closely at anything anymore? "Delete that," Madison had said, her voice shaking for the first time. "Oh, I will," Blake had promised. "The second you change my grade. Otherwise, it goes live at noon. That gives you," he checked his phone, 3 hours to decide. "Your career or your principles, your choice." They'd left her classroom then. Skylar still filming, already posting clips with captions like, "Teacher learns her place," and "When keeping it real goes wrong." Madison had sat at her desk, hands trembling, trying to think. She could go to Principal Coleman, but what would she say? That students she'd already accused of plagiarism were now threatening her with deep fakes. Even if he believed her, even if he wanted to help, What could he do against the Harrison family's influence? She'd taught her morning classes in a daze, jumping every time a student pulled out their phone. During second period, she'd noticed increased whispering. More phones pointed her way. Had they released something early by third period? She'd had her answer. Someone had leaked screenshots from the fake social media accounts to the parent WhatsApp group. Her school email was flooded with complaints, demands for explanations, threats of formal complaints. Principal Coleman had summoned her during lunch. "Madison," he'd said, not meeting her eyes. "We have a situation. The accounts are fake," she'd said immediately. "This is retaliation for catching Blake Harrison plagiarizing." "I'm sure that's true," Coleman had replied in a tone that suggested he wasn't sure at all. "But the parents are concerned. The board is asking questions. Perhaps it would be best if you took a few days off. Let things calm down." "You want me to hide?" Madison had asked incredulously. "That's your solution." "I want to protect you," Coleman had said, "and frankly, to protect the school. The Harrison family has been very generous to us. If they decide to withdraw their support—" He'd left the threat unfinished, but the message was clear. Madison was on her own. She'd returned to her classroom to find it empty except for one student. Harper Chen, no relation to Jessica, one of her brightest students, sat in the front row with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Miss Harper," the girl had said. "This isn't fair. You're the first teacher who actually cares about us learning, not just about keeping the donors happy." "It's not your fault," Madison had told her. "I recorded Blake threatening you this morning," Harper had whispered, "with my phone in my pocket. The audio isn't great, but you can hear him talking about the deep fakes. I'll testify if you need me to." Madison had felt a spark of hope. "Thank you, Harper. That's very brave." "My parents will kill me," the girl had admitted. "But what Blake's doing is wrong. Someone needs to stand up to him." Fourth period. Last class of the day. Madison had been analyzing a quote from To Kill a Mockingbird about courage when Blake had burst in. Now, here they were, the moment of truth literally ticking down on Blake's phone screen. 2 seconds, Blake said. 1. Madison thought about Mason, about their plans for the future, about the students like Harper who deserved better, about every teacher who'd been bullied into compromising their values, about every time someone with money and power had crushed someone simply because they could. "No," she said. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Blake blinked. "What?" "No," Madison repeated, stronger now. "I won't change your grade. You plagiarized. You failed. Deal with it." Blake's face flushed red. "You stupid!" "Furthermore," Madison continued, finding her voice, "I have recordings of your threats, multiple witnesses to your harassment, evidence of the fake accounts traced back to IP addresses. I'm betting match yours or your friends. So go ahead. Post your deep fake. Let's see what happens when the FBI's cybercrime division gets involved." It was a bluff. Mostly. She had Harper's audio recording and her own documentation, but nothing as comprehensive as she implied. But Blake didn't know that. For the first time since she'd met him, Blake Harrison looked uncertain. "You're bluffing," he said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Try me," Madison shot back. "Your move, Mr. Harrison." Blake's phone trembled in his hand, behind him. Skylar had stopped filming, her eyes wide. Colton looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. "This isn't over," Blake snarled. "You think you've won? You have no idea what my family can do. We'll bury you. You'll never teach again. You'll never. That's when they heard it. Footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, measured, purposeful. The kind of footsteps that made everyone in the room turn toward the door. The handle turned slowly. The door opened, and Madison's entire world shifted on its axis. Mason Reed filled the doorframe like a force of nature. 6'4" of controlled power, shoulders that had to turn sideways to enter, arms that could bend steel. But it wasn't his physical presence that made everyone in the room freeze. It was his expression, completely calm, almost serene, with a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Hey, babe," he said to Madison, his voice gentle as summer rain. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was murder." Blake Harrison took an involuntary step backward, his phone lowering slightly. The predator suddenly recognized a bigger predator in the room, but Mason didn't even look at him. His eyes stayed on Madison, checking her over with the practiced assessment of someone who'd spent years reading body language in the ring. "You okay?" he asked. Madison found her voice. "Mason, what are you doing here?" "Oh, funny story." Mason stepped into the room, moving with the fluid grace of a trained fighter. Every student shrank back as he passed, but he seemed oblivious to their fear. "Principal Coleman called me, said you might need some support, something about a situation with a student." Blake's face went pale. "Coleman called you." Now Mason did look at him, and his smile widened. "Blake Harrison, right star of the lacrosse team, my buddy Dante trains your teammate. Says you've got quite the reputation." "I don't know what she told you." Blake started, raising his phone again like a weapon. "But she's lying. We have proof that she... What?" Mason interrupted mildly. He pulled out his own phone, swiping to a video. "That she caught you plagiarizing because I've got the evidence right here. 97% match to a paper published 2 years ago. Pretty sloppy, if you ask me." Skylar Mitchell, who'd been filming everything, suddenly lowered her phone. "How did you—" "Oh, Skylar." Mason's voice brightened like he'd just remembered something delightful. "That reminds me, your live stream, the one you've been broadcasting for the past 10 minutes, really fascinating stuff. Especially the part where Blake threatened to release deepfake pornography of a teacher. That's... what's the technical term? Oh, right. Super illegal." Every phone in the room suddenly felt like a live grenade. Students who'd been recording started fumbling with their devices, trying to delete videos. But Mason held up a hand. "No need to delete anything," he said cheerfully. "In fact, I hope you saved it all. Evidence is so important in federal cases." Blake tried to regain control. "You can't threaten us. Do you know who my family is? The Harrisons of Harrison Construction." Mason pulled up another screen on his phone. "Annual revenue of 42 million, major donors to Westbridge Academy specifically. Your uncle, the mayor, who's currently under investigation for embezzling city funds." The room went so quiet, you could hear the air conditioning humming. That's not public," Blake stammered. "It will be tomorrow," Mason said conversationally. "Wall Street Journal. My friend's a reporter there. Been working on the story for months. Fascinating how your family's donations to the school coincidentally match the amounts missing from the city budget. But hey, I'm sure that's just a coincidence." Blake's phone shook in his hand. "You're lying." Mason shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe your uncle should have been more careful with his WhatsApp messages. Amazing what people put in writing these days." He glanced at Skylar. "Speaking of which, how many followers do you have on your stream right now?" Skylar checked her phone with trembling fingers. 12,000. 12,000 witnesses, Mason mused, all watching Blake Harrison threaten a teacher with deepfake revenge porn. That's going to be hard to spin, even for your family's lawyers. Colton Williams, who'd been silent until now, finally spoke up. Blake, maybe we should— Shut up, Blake snarled. He turned back to Mason, desperation creeping into his voice. What do you want? Me. Mason looked genuinely surprised. I don't want anything. I'm just here to pick up my girlfriend for lunch. But if you're asking what would be the smart move here— He pretended to think. Well, let's see. You could post that deep fake, destroy Madison's career, and feel really powerful for about 5 minutes. Then the FBI shows up. You get expelled, criminal charges are filed. Your family's dirty laundry gets aired in the Wall Street Journal, and you spend the next few years learning what real power dynamics look like in federal prison. He paused, letting that sink in. Or, he continued, you could delete that video, apologize to Miss Harper and her class for disrupting their education, accept your failing grade like an adult, and walk away with your future intact. Your choice. Blake looked around the room desperately, seeking support. But Skylar had already lowered her phone. Colton had stepped away from him. The other students watched with a mixture of fear and fascination, seeing their untouchable classmate finally face consequences. This isn't how it works, Blake said weakly. My family owns this town. Your family owns some buildings, Mason corrected. They don't own justice, and they definitely don't own the internet, where 12,000 people just watched you commit multiple felonies. He glanced at his phone. Make that 15,000. This is really going viral. Madison watched in amazement as Blake's carefully constructed power crumbled. The boy who'd terrorized students and teachers for years was being undone not by violence, but by simple accountability. I'll delete it, Blake said suddenly, his finger moving to his phone. Screen record that. Mason instructed the class. Everyone document him deleting the files. We want a clear record. Multiple phones captured Blake Harrison deleting the deep fake video, his hands shaking as he removed file after file. When he was done, he looked up at Mason with pure hatred. You've ruined everything, he said. No, Madison spoke up for the first time since Mason arrived. You ruined everything the moment you chose to plagiarize. Everything after that was just consequences catching up. We should go, Skylar whispered urgently to Blake. My parents are texting. They're seeing the live stream. Wait, Mason said, and his tone made everyone freeze again. There's one more thing. The fake social media accounts. The harassment campaign. All of it needs to stop. Today. If I see one more post, one more fake account, even one more dirty look in Miss Harper's direction, that Wall Street Journal article runs immediately. Are we clear? Blake nodded mutely. I need to hear it. Mason insisted. Clear? Blake mumbled. Louder, please. For the stream. Clear, Blake shouted, his face burning with humiliation. Excellent. Mason's smile returned. Oh, and Blake, you might want to call your uncle. Tell him to check the news. The FBI raid should be starting any minute now. As if on cue, Blake's phone rang. He looked at the screen and his face went white. It's my mom. Better take that, Mason suggested. Madison, ready for lunch, Blake. Skylar. And Colton fled the classroom, Blake already babbling frantically into his phone. The remaining students sat in stunned silence, processing what they'd just witnessed. Harper Chen was the first to speak. That was incredible. Mason's entire demeanor shifted. The dangerous edge disappeared, replaced by the gentle giant Madison knew and loved. Thanks, but I didn't do anything special, just helped level the playing field a bit. How did you know all that? Another student asked. About the investigation and everything. Mason grinned. I didn't. Well, not all of it. The Wall Street Journal thing, total bluff. But people with secrets always assume you know more than you do. Blake painted himself into that corner. So there's no article? Madison asked. Oh, there might be now, Mason said. 15,000 people watched that live stream, including, I'm betting, at least a few journalists. Blake just confirmed a bunch of rumors on camera. The bell rang, but nobody moved. You should go, Madison told her students gently. We'll resume normal lessons tomorrow. As the students filed out, many stopped to apologize to Madison for not speaking up sooner. Harper Chen lingered until the end. Miss Harper, she said quietly, I'm sorry it got this bad. We all knew Blake was a bully, but we were too scared to do anything. It's not your fault, Madison assured her. Standing up to power is never easy. But you did it, Harper said. And your boyfriend did it without even raising his voice. That's real strength. After Harper left, Madison and Mason stood alone in the empty classroom. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving Madison shaky. How did Coleman know to call you? She asked. Mason pulled her into a gentle hug. He didn't. I was already on my way. I saw Skylar's live stream notification pop up. Teacher learns her place. I knew something was wrong. You could have hurt them, Madison said into his chest. Everyone expected you to. That's what they wanted, Mason said. An excuse to play victim, to flip the narrative. Violence would have given them power. This way, they hung themselves with their own rope. Madison pulled back to look at him. The investigation, the WhatsApp messages. Complete fiction, Mason admitted. But guilty people always believe their secrets are about to come out. I just gave his paranoia a little push. They were interrupted by a knock on the door. Principal Coleman entered, looking haggard. Madison, I owe you an apology, he began. I just got off the phone with the superintendent and the police and about 6 lawyers. The live stream. 15,000 witnesses, Mason said helpfully. 22,000 now, Coleman corrected weakly. It's the top trending topic in the state. Blake Harrison threatening a teacher with deep fakes. The mayor's office is in crisis mode. Am I fired? Madison asked directly. Fired? Coleman looked shocked. Madison, you're a hero. The board is meeting in emergency session right now. They want to give you a commendation and a raise, and probably anything else you want to keep you from suing us into oblivion. I don't want special treatment, Madison said. I just want to teach without being harassed. That's guaranteed, Coleman promised. Blake is suspended pending expulsion hearings. Skylar and Colton are facing disciplinary action. We're implementing new policies about cyber harassment, and he hesitated. I'm announcing my resignation, effective end of the school year. Madison was stunned. Sir, that's not necessary. Yes, it is. Coleman met her eyes for the first time. I failed you. I failed every teacher and student who was bullied, while I looked the other way because I was afraid of losing donations. Someone else needs to lead this school. Someone with backbone. He left them alone again. Madison sank into her chair, overwhelmed. You okay? Mason asked, kneeling beside her. I think so. It's just, this morning I was ready to quit, to let them win, And now? Now you're the teacher who stood up to the untouchable family, Mason finished. That's going to follow you in good ways and bad. Madison's phone buzzed. Messages were pouring in from other teachers, parents, even students from other schools. The video had spread beyond anyone's imagination. She saw headlines already forming online: "Teacher stands up to deepfake bully." MMA boyfriend's brilliant takedown goes viral. Harrison family scandal exposed in classroom live stream. "What happens now?" she asked. Now Mason helped her to her feet. "Now we get lunch. Then you come back tomorrow and teach, and the next day, and the day after that. Because that's what you do. You're a teacher, a damn good one who refuses to let bullies win." As they walked out of the classroom, Madison saw students in the hallway filming them, whispering excitedly. She heard fragments of conversation. "Did you see when he said federal prison? Blake looked like he was going to cry. Miss Harper is such a badass." In the parking lot, news vans were already arriving. Mason steered Madison away from them, toward his truck. "They'll want interviews," Madison said. "They'll want a lot of things," Mason agreed. "But you don't owe them anything. You've already done the important part." Which was? Standing up, saying no, showing every kid in that school that bullies don't always win. They drove to their favorite lunch spot, a quiet cafe away from the chaos. Madison's phone wouldn't stop buzzing, so she turned it off. For an hour. They just talked about normal things, weekend plans, Mason's upcoming fight, anything but what had just happened. But reality couldn't be avoided forever. When Madison turned her phone back on, she had hundreds of messages. The most important one was from Harper Chen. "Miss Harper, you probably won't see this in all the chaos, but I wanted you to know you've changed everything. Kids are already standing up to other bullies, calling them out. It's like the whole school suddenly remembered we outnumber them. Thank you for showing us how to fight back. With truth, not fists." Madison showed the message to Mason, who smiled. "That right there," he said. "That's why you're a teacher, not for the Blakes of the world, but for the Harpers, the kids who needed to see that standing up is possible." Over the next few days, the story exploded beyond Westbridge Academy. The live stream clip was analyzed on news shows, discussed in education forums, used as a case study in digital ethics classes. Blake Harrison became the face of entitled bullying, while Madison reluctantly became a symbol of teacher resistance. The legal fallout was swift. Blake was expelled and charged with cyber harassment and attempted extortion. His family's lawyers kept him out of jail. But the damage to their reputation was irreparable. The rumored federal investigation into the mayor turned out to be fiction, but the increased scrutiny uncovered enough minor corruption to force his resignation. Skylar Mitchell lost her social media accounts and faced suspension. She publicly apologized, claiming she'd been caught up in Blake's influence. Some believed her. Madison wasn't sure she did. Colton Williams surprised everyone by becoming a witness for the prosecution. He testified about Blake's pattern of bullying, the other students he'd targeted, the teachers he'd driven away. His courage inspired others to come forward. Principal Coleman kept his word and resigned. His replacement, Dr. Catherine Park, was a former teacher who'd left education due to similar harassment. She implemented sweeping reforms, including mandatory digital citizenship classes and strict anti-retaliation policies. Mason became something of a celebrity in his own right. Videos analyzing his psychological takedown went viral, with self-defense experts praising his restraint and tactical brilliance. He declined all interview requests, saying simply, "I just protected someone I love. Anyone would do the same." 6 months later, Madison stood before her AP Literature class, discussing The Crucible. The irony of teaching about witch hunts after surviving her own wasn't lost on her. "Who can tell me why John Proctor refuses to sign the false confession?" she asked. Harper Chen raised her hand. "Because sometimes your name, your integrity, is all you have. And once you compromise that, you've lost everything." "Excellent," Madison said. "And how does that relate to our discussions about digital age ethics?" Another student, one who'd been in the room during the confrontation, spoke up. "It's easier to compromise now, to give in to pressure. But it's also easier for the truth to come out. Like, everything is recorded. You can't hide abuse of power anymore. But you also can't hide mistakes," another student countered. "One bad moment can define you forever." The discussion that followed was rich, complex, everything Madison had hoped for when she became a teacher. Her students weren't just analyzing literature, they were connecting it to their lived experiences, thinking critically about power, truth, and courage. After class, Madison found Mason waiting in the hallway. He still picked her up for lunch sometimes, though the celebrity had mostly died down. "Good class?" he asked. "The best," Madison said. "They're thinking, really thinking, about these issues." As they walked to the parking lot, they passed a bulletin board covered in anti-bullying posters. One caught Madison's eye. It was a photo from that day, showing her standing firm while Blake loomed over her. Someone had added the caption, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but acting in spite of it." "You know what the best part is," Mason said, following her gaze. "It's not about us anymore. It's about them." The students who see that poster and think, "I can stand up too." Madison nodded. The deepfake video had been deleted, the bullies punished, the policies changed. But the real victory was smaller and larger than all of that. It was Harper Chen running for student council. It was former victims becoming advocates. It was teachers feeling empowered to maintain standards without fear. "Any regrets?" Mason asked as they reached his truck. Madison thought about it, the stress, the fear, the moment when she'd almost given in, the nights she'd wondered if it was worth it. "No," she said finally. "No regrets. I did what teachers are supposed to do. I protected my students' right to learn in a safe environment, even if that meant protecting them from each other. And if it happens again." Madison smiled, thinking of all the teachers who'd reached out, sharing their own stories, finding their own courage. "Then I'll handle it the same way, with truth, with documentation, with support from people like you, and without backing down." As they drove away from Westbridge Academy, Madison's phone buzzed with a message from a teacher in another state. "Just watched your video for the 100th time. Facing my own Blake Harrison tomorrow. Thank you for showing me it's possible." Madison typed back, "You've got this. Remember, they only have the power we give them. Take it back." The truth hadn't just set her free. It had started a revolution, one classroom at a time. And that was worth every moment of fear, every threat, every challenge. Because, somewhere, a student was watching, learning, finding their own courage. And that made everything worth it. 1 year later, Madison stood at the podium of a national education conference, addressing an auditorium of 3,000 teachers. The title of her presentation glowed on the screen behind her, Digital age integrity when standing up goes viral. The question I get asked most, she began, her voice steady and confident, is whether I'd do it again, knowing what would happen. The media circus, the death threats from Blake's supporters, the job offers from schools trying to capitalize on my notoriety. She clicked to the next slide, showing statistics. 73% of teachers report being harassed by students or parents. 91% say they've compromised their standards due to pressure. But here's the interesting part. Since that live stream went viral, reports of teachers standing up to bullying have increased by 400%. In the front row, Mason watched with pride. Beside him sat Harper Chen, now a freshman at State University, majoring in journalism with a focus on educational equity. I didn't plan to become a symbol, Madison continued. I just wanted to teach literature to teenagers. But sometimes life hands you a different lesson plan. The real heroes aren't me or my boyfriend. They're every teacher who watched that video and decided they deserved better. Every student who realized their voice matters. Every administrator who chose integrity over donations. She clicked to her final slide, a photo of her current classroom at Westbridge Academy. The walls were covered with student work, quotes about courage, and yes, that famous poster of her standing up to Blake. Blake Harrison served 6 months in juvenile detention. He now speaks at schools about the dangers of cyberbullying and entitlement. Not because a judge ordered it, but because he genuinely wants to prevent others from making his mistakes. Redemption is possible, but only after accountability. So yes, Madison concluded, I would do it again. Because teaching isn't just about literature or math or science. It's about showing young people that integrity matters, that truth has power, and that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply refuse to back down. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, but for Madison. The real victory was the email she'd received that morning from a teacher in rural Montana. Faced down my own bully yesterday, documented everything, stood firm. The kids are already walking taller. Thank you for lighting the way.